This week, do not avert your ears for a second, because if you're not already immersed in AI, this episode could be game-changing for your business. Welcome to the Profit Cash Growth Podcast. This is the podcast for 6- and 7-figure business owners who are looking to grow a financially successful business. My co-host, Claire Hancott, is a finance director, chartered accountant, and entrepreneur. And every week, I'll be exploring guidance and frameworks designed to help you increase your profits, improve your cash flow, and grow your business. So we've got an absolutely packed episode today. I think it's going to be really difficult to kind of keep this compact, so I apologise in advance if this is a little bit longer than our average podcast. We've got so much to cover today. We're going to be talking about AI, and we haven't done a lot about AI, have we, on the podcast?
No, we haven't.
So we're going to be in a pretty jam-packed episode on AI, and it's interesting because I want to talk a bit about kind of human progress and stuff like that to start with, because I've been hearing various things this week and there's some posts gone out, and I was just thinking a minute ago when you said make me the tea, and I thought, God, and I'm groaning like it's a real hassle, even though we've got a boiling water tap now. We've got boiling water on tap, and I was thinking how quickly you just adjust to human progress and productivity. And I think this is all relevant with AI, isn't it? And everything else. And I've been listening to a lot. I mean, everyone's talking about AI. It's just absolutely crazy at the moment. So there's a lot to sort of consume. And a few things that I've heard this week is things like, John Maynard Keynes saying in 1945 that by 2030, we will only be working 10 to 14 hours a week because of productivity gains that are expected. Human productivity gains mean that we will spend most of the time enjoying ourselves and only working a few hours. And it's almost like exactly what we're hearing now about AI. Do you think?
I think we've heard it about every revolution, though, haven't we? Every time something, every time there's a new mega trend. I'm not talking about, TikTok was invented and things like that. Mega trends, like significant changes in the way that evolution happens as we know it. And, AI does that, electricity does that, the Industrial Revolution, all of those types of things. And people always claim the same thing, but I think it's absolute rubbish. And every time I see Daniel Priestley in particular, I think probably every single post of his every day now is about AI and how it's going to take over the world. And I just think there are people that don't have the internet. Like there are so many people in the world that don't have the internet, don't use computers on a daily basis, don't interact with technology in any way, and yet there's us claiming that AI is going to take over the world, and it's just not. It might take over some people's world, but that's a small group of people.
And an interesting stat I heard this week is, did you know that when that statement was made by John Maynard Keynes, and it was made on the basis of them, they looked over the hill and of everyone ploughing the field, and this tractor just came along, and they said that tractor is going to do in 100th of the time what that field of 100 people are doing. Everyone's out of a job, but the productivity gains means that we're going to move into a utopia where we don't work and various other things. And the irony is that all that happens is that we find other things to fill our time with. And did you know that 60% of the jobs that exist today were not even jobs that existed back then? So 60% of the jobs that we do now were not even jobs.
Yeah.
So the point is like, as we go into the AI revolution, the bit that we always become blindsided with these things is that it creates new roles, new jobs, new ideas. So actually, yes, there'll be displacement, but we don't know what in another 50 years, 60% of people will be doing won't even exist today. We can't even comprehend what it will be that they'll be doing.
What I think is really interesting is, just in my 20 years of work, I have, the very first organisation that I joined had an IT department, and they took charge of everything. And then slowly through the years, it started to become more common that you would have an IT department, and then you'd have a development department, and they would be the codey people, the people that would be doing the website changes, things like that. So even seeing that shift from IT being about hardware and laptops and, can I get my floppy disk in and all of that kind of stuff, to be more about websites and coding and data. And now I think it's only going to be a matter of time till we start seeing it being quite common that people have a head of AI in their business. And it just being this new role that comes into the workplace. And absolutely, some jobs will disappear. But, years ago, there were companies where people would make floppy disks and people would make videotapes, and those people are not out of jobs now. So there will just be another new thing that we need to support AI or to drive something different. I also think, the tractor thing I think is really poignant because, yes, the tractor has taken a lot of jobs away from people that now don't work in the fields, but you go to large parts of the world and they don't use tractors, they still use people.
So they've not even adopted this technology.
And I think that's the thing, is like, we live in this little bubble where if we're using something, we think everybody else is doing it, and actually they're not.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's two other points. I mean, I'm trying to throw everything I've seen this week, because it's been a bit of a mind.
You had a really good post on LinkedIn.
A mind mess. Well, I was going to talk about that. I was also going to talk about mobile phone freedom, which was the other thing, which was like the first advert that Nokia put out for the mobile phone was all about the fact that the mobile phone was going to give every human on this planet complete freedom. Because at the time, the idea was you're chained to your desk because of the wired phone, of the wired communication, and all of a sudden you've got this wireless communication, and that is going to enable us to have amazing free lives. Now, I don't know about you, but who feels free now with a mobile phone in their pocket?
Well, that's ironic, as like we had physical dependency, but now we've got emotional dependency, haven't we?
Yeah.
So yes, okay, we were physically chained to our desks, but that wasn't really the reason why people were sitting at their desks for so long. How
did somebody, you look back now in hindsight and think it looks so obvious, but how did somebody not think at the time that, okay, so what you're saying is these problems that we solve when we go to work at a desk for those finite amount of hours can now follow us home with us? And nobody saw that and thought, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? Like that, how you don't see what is so glaringly obvious in the future. And I wonder what it is that we're not seeing now about all of these things. They're going to be so glaringly obvious in the future. But the post I did this week on LinkedIn as well of our local bakery, absolutely shocked. Great big new poster, covering the whole of door window, just with the simple words, "We now take debit and credit cards."
Yep, this is my favourite bakery. This is Oliver's in town.
And it's the word now.
You can still go in there and get a chicken mayo brown bap, absolutely delicious, for £3. It's amazing. It's like it's stuck in the 1800s or something, because like even the pricing hasn't kept up with, the deli next door that where you go in and it's like £9 for a roll.
But here we are, and for them it's a big celebration that they've now moving from cash to being able to take cards.
And there's me thinking, when are we going to have the Amazon shopping experience? Like if you go to like the O2, for example, the shop inside the O2 where you get like water and packets of Maltesers and that kind of stuff, you scan your card, it opens for you. It must recognise your face or something, and it tracks your movement through the shop, what you pick up, and you just walk out and it charges you. It's like, I'm thinking, when's that coming to our local shops? And they're like, oh, we're now taking debit and credit card.
Look, I mean, and that's the reality you've said there with the tractor, that the void will just get bigger between those that do and those that don't. But it already exists, because like you say, here we're using combine harvesters, tractors, and in parts of the world they're still out there with lots of people's labour using their hands. And I don't think AI is going to be any different.
And hey, look, there are loads and loads of benefits to being on the right side of technology, isn't there? And being a trendsetter and
absolutely
keeping up with it. So that's what we're going to talk about today, isn't it, Simon?
We are. Well, let's first of all do this week's news story, which also wraps in. You are going to see that this episode is like, I'm like Beethoven and this is our AI symphony, because this connects beautifully. So the news story, we're just going to touch on this really quickly because I just picked up on it. It's quite an interesting one. The actual headline, which is more of a joke, but there is a serious thing behind it, which is ChatGPT's usage plummets in the summer when students aren't cheating on their homework. Now, this is I wish I could put the graph up, but it's an audio podcast, but do go and search this. Go and search the user numbers for OpenAI. And it is literally like it fell off a cliff. So just to give you some idea, they were running at somewhere between 75 and 100 billion users. This is usage on the platform. And it collapsed to about 20 to 25 billion and has remained there ever since the sort of second week of June.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's scrambling around. Nobody has an answer for this. Nobody really knows why this is. But the biggest theory that's come out here is that the universities all broke up.
And schools.
Because
universities tend to break up a bit earlier.
And while it's a bit of a play and a joke on the fact that, basically like 75% of ChatGPT's usage is people cheating on their homework, I think the point here, going back to our conversations earlier, is that people again fail to recognise that young people are always the early adopters of technology. In every single sense, they're always. So actually, what this is probably saying is that 75% of the use of AI is being adopted by a very young generation, and the older generation are adopting it at a much slower pace, which we know I can believe that's a fact, and again, why it's going to be much more painful to come into businesses quicker than we think. These young people will grow up with it. In 20 years' time, they'll be the leaders of these businesses.
Yeah.
So it will almost definitely move. But will it go overnight and click a finger? Probably not. And I think those stats are quite poignant.
I was reading another statistic as well, and it was around how ChatGPT's business use and business subscriptions and things like that have fallen for the first time since 2022. And they're saying it's because there's generally a little bit of a concern about, and maybe a lack of education and understanding around how the protection around ChatGPT works when you do and don't put information into it. But they're saying that, you know, with platforms like Microsoft in particular now pushing Copilot a bit more, and that being wrapped into like your Microsoft subscription and stuff, they're saying that they're starting to lose business users to some of the more like essentially Gemini and Google and Microsoft is where everybody's going. Oh, that was really terrible. I struggled to get my words out there. I think what's really interesting is we were talking about this the other night because we have such a fun life that we talk about business related things all the time. And I said that I think that in the future, in like 15, 20 years time, I don't think ChatGPT will be for use by the public. I think ChatGPT will return to almost like what its roots was that it's an open AI.
Open source for everyone else.
Yeah, that it's for developers and businesses to use to build consumer-facing platforms.
And this will be the missing part about all these additional jobs that will appear, is that at the moment, the consumer's talking directly to ChatGPT, but to be honest with you, it's still way too complicated for the average human to want to properly get value out of. And there's probably 3 layers or 4 layers of middlemen between the open source large language model and the use case for the consumer or business for there to be other businesses and industries that will build in that. And I think that will be where I think there'll be 60% more jobs that will just appear in this middleman of companies opening and businesses that are using this as their main source, and that will be the backbone of it. And that's kind of how it's being set up. And there'll be 3 or 4, you know, there's Grok, there's DeepSeek, there's OpenAI, there's Anthropic. There's about 4 or 5 big ones on there, and they'll all, you know, charge for their API usage with these various techs. So
it's interesting.
Yes. So let's continue the symphony onto this week's deep dive, and let's give some real value back as to 5 ways that people perhaps hadn't thought of to use ChatGPT or AI in their business. So we've obviously been pretty aggressive adopters of AI in your company, in Profit Cash Growth, in the businesses I have and broader businesses, and you know, I think it's fair to say we're loving the technology. You know, it's doing different things, but actually most of the challenge is having the creativity to understand what it can do and where it can really add value. So you're just going to go through kind of 5 big ones that you've kind of come across that have really helped you, that people may or may not have thought of themselves, and just share some practical use cases. Yeah,
I think when you start to really think outside the box a little bit and think about problems that you've got and not just using ChatGPT to draft emails and things like that, then it really can be quite valuable. I will start by saying that we have a business license. We're all on the Teams license for ChatGPT. And what that means is that any information that we put into ChatGPT remains within our lockdown organisation. If you're using one of the free platforms or one of the personal upgrades, then essentially everything that you put into ChatGPT goes into the learning model and therefore is essentially available for other users to search. So you've got to be really, really careful that you're on either a Teams or a Pro license.
Yeah.
That's the only way that your data's protected. So I'll start by saying that.
I think that's an important point, because especially with IP and, you know,
data
everything
protection
you're putting in there.
Yeah.
Like basically, you know, you're just feeding a model that, you know, you don't know where it's going to come out at the other end when other people are, you know, doing searches and various other things. So I think if you've got stuff, you know, if you're any serious business, I think you need to be on a Teams plan, knowing that the most important value you're getting from the Teams plan is a commitment from them that you're not feeding their language model in its learning any further.
And we'll start with just the very first one that I've been using ChatGPT for lately, and that's the recruitment process. So what we do, Profit Cash Growth, is we take the job spec and every CV that we receive, we just plug it in and we ask ChatGPT to give us a rating, say how good that person is. So we ask it to essentially take the 10 key points from the job spec and then rate the person's CV against whether gives a traffic light system, so red, green, amber, as to how much of a fit it thinks that person's CV and skill set is for the job. And
part of the value in the prompting is things is they always say about like positioning. So do you say act as the world's best recruitment manager for profit cash growth? So you're giving it the who am I, what am I trying to do, and what company am I doing it for, and then do it to get the very best results out. Is that how you prompt?
So the prompting is really important, and when you're on the pro version, it allows you to do that, especially if you have a project set up. So we set up a project for recruitment, and then that allows you to put the prompts in, and it even gives you like quick buttons that you can click as well. So it just speeds that up. So it's also important that we're not just relying on skills, especially at the lower end of the recruitment market, when you might get somebody that maybe doesn't come with the 10 out of 10 on the skills that we need for the job, and instead it's about our culture, the way they've written their CV, things like that. So we also plug in our cultural values as well.
Okay, to say how aligned are they with them. That's clever.
In terms of their writing style and things like that.
Just one little hack to add on prompting. You might not have thought about this yourself, but I saw this recently. I thought it was quite a good one, which is ask ChatGPT to create the prompt for itself. Like, it's actually quite smart. I say, you know, what prompt would you give yourself to get the maximum value out of this process that I'm trying to do? And it will write the prompt better than you can write the prompt. And ironically, I found that really useful. Somebody suggested that recently.
So that's the first step that we have in the interview process. Is the CV comes in, we feed it into ChatGPT, and then if they get a certain score, so if they hit like 6 of the skills, then we'd go to the next stage of the recruitment process with them.
That's a great use case.
We've been looking at agent mode because, you know, most applications will come in via LinkedIn or via Indeed in particular. So we've been looking at trying to use the agent mode so that it will go and fetch those CVs for us as well. But we found it a little bit temperamental, let's say. So we're doing that manually and we're plugging it in, but it's definitely meaning that we're not having to just sift through loads and loads of CVs and covering letters all the time.
Amazing. So number one is think about usage during your recruitment process and play around with it. You know, that's just a handful of ideas, but there's a ton of different ways, but use it for your recruitment process.
It also, the final thing that we were doing is the candidates that were getting through to the interview stage, we were then asking ChatGPT to suggest questions. So suggest 5 questions that we should be asking this candidate based on their strengths and weaknesses, to try and, like, you know, dive a little bit deeper into the areas that we think they might be weak, or things like that as well.
And it threw out some really good questions and ideas. It was actually brilliant. It really was a really good prompt, and it made the interview, because I sat in the interview with you, didn't I? It made the interview feel of higher quality than really valuable. Because
we focused only on the things that we needed to focus on for that candidate,
and that we were worried about were the skills gaps, and it really helped us. You know, I think if the person had answered it, you know, not right, and plugging that gap, it would have been obvious, and actually really helped us plug that. So I like that. That's great. So give us number 2 then, Claire.
Number 2, so I am using ChatGPT like a CRM. So I do most of the sales in my business, and also as the finance director, I'm having much higher level conversations generally with potential customers and existing customers about their business. So as an example, I got on a discovery call with somebody the other day. They mentioned to me the history of, you know, they'd had a different company beforehand, why they moved away from that company, moved to this different business model that they operate today, their plans for the future, how they're going to enter into different areas of the market and things like that. And all of that information remains in my head. Okay. And the difficulty that I've had is trying to firstly document that information, and then secondly share that information with the rest of my team, because when we take a customer on board, once they've signed the contract, essentially they get allocated to a team member. And trying to feed all of the information that stays in my head over to a team member has been very, very difficult. But it's really critical information, because all of those little tiny nuggets, golden nuggets of info, we'll decide, for example, what KPIs we should be tracking, what suggestions we make to that business about how they can grow and things like that. So it's really valuable information. So what we've now done is we take the transcript from every single meeting that we have with a customer, and we have a dedicated section on our SharePoint system where we make sure that the transcripts are saved down with the date attached to them and things like that. And then we have a custom GPT for each customer. The reason why we do it...
Whoa.
The reason it's a custom GPT...
What's a custom GPT? You can't just throw this out like people think about like. So I need to hit the buzzer here.
A custom GPT is just like a mini version of ChatGPT. It's got all the same functionality, but it learns to do things in a certain way.
How do we do that in ChatGPT?
There's a button in ChatGPT that says custom GPT, and it talks you through how to do it.
Right. So effectively what you're doing is you're creating a mini language model, so to speak, that is just about that customer, and you're feeding it lots of information.
Yes.
You're training it itself.
So we're training it just about that customer.
Okay.
So the custom chat GPT, so you can lock it down to just using the transcripts of the meetings that we put into it, for example.
Yeah.
But we don't want to do that. We want to say that when you're learning about the customer, prioritize those meeting notes, but also pull on more information that you might know about the wider domain, the competitors, the environmental landscape, all of those types of things that are relevant to that customer as well. What that enables us to do is, for example, the management accountant, when they get allocated to a member of our team, the management accountant can go in and say, summarise everything I need to know strategically about this business. Talk to me about their pricing. Have they mentioned pricing? Have they mentioned growth plans? All of that information is logged and becomes searchable to the team member.
Okay.
And therefore, I don't need to worry about doing a handover and trying to get that information over, because every meeting with that client is documented and becomes searchable for every team member.
So it's basically like a really, really high level version of a standard operating procedure for a business by customer. So it's really smart. That is amazing. I was sorry. And you must have thought he's laughing. Why is he smiling there while I'm saying that? Because I remember that person that put that comment on your LinkedIn just with the word Claire lives in the year 2030.
Do you know what? It was a real.
I felt like that then for a second.
It was a real barrier, and I noticed it was like a shortcoming of mine that I think I was taking for granted how much information the business owners share with me on LinkedIn when we have a little chat on LinkedIn beforehand.
We're not using that data in the way that, like, it's like that. I mean, something that is really like the penny is dropping quickly with AI. Like, it's only as good as the data it has access to, which is why they've trained these large language models, and why they're so good, and why you can, create your own mini version of it, niching right down to your business, or down to your customer, or down to your HR procedure. I mean, you could have a mini version of your policies and procedures, or various things for everything, but it's only as good as what you feed it. And there's no harm in feeding it everything, even if it's a bit messy, because it will just work it out.
Yeah.
So record everything, have everything constantly recorded, have everything saved down, transcribe, just feed it in, because it will just train it. All you're doing is what OpenAI have been doing with their entire business
with
in the world.
Yeah.
But you're doing it
really
on
niche
for the
niche customer.
Yeah.
What really the main reason behind this is about building a business that isn't dependent on me.
Of course.
And I was becoming a bottleneck in my business, because in my head was all the information about the customer that had been shared throughout that discovery process and that sales process and that relationship that I built with them. And then it became this bottleneck, because the management accountant couldn't build a reporting pack until I'd had time to sit down and download that information on them. What if I forgot to mention something crucial? So I was becoming a bottleneck, and it was thinking about how can we capture that information and make it available for everybody else to use.
Now, are you concerned at all? Because I'm listening to this thinking, right, you're putting huge amounts of time, effort, money, resource into building out and really putting a lot of your business in through this particular organisation, ChatGPT, OpenAI, AI, and whatever else. And everything now sits in their model and in their infrastructure and everything like that. Like, you don't own any of it. All of a sudden, you're giving.
Well, we
it all
do,
to
because
somebody
we're
else.
on the Teams license.
You are, but
so we do.
What happens if the business went bust? What happens if
What you mean, ChatGPT? Well,
where's the risk factor on all this?
I think it's very low risk, because actually what we have done is we've developed a process and a procedure. So we now have a central depository. What we didn't have before was a way of making sure that every single interaction with that customer was documented. We've got that process in place, and that data just simply resides in our SharePoint in Word documents. So we would need to just bolt on any AI language model onto it to say search this repository of data. So the data resides on my server.
You've answered my question. So you're doing a two-step process. You're saving down all the data on your own server.
Yeah.
So you've always got access to it, and then you're feeding it into the model. So if the model just disappeared tomorrow, you could just retrain and feed them all into a new model.
Yes.
And you'd be aware.
Yeah. So we
That's
could
really
move
important.
to anything. The only reason we've chosen to use the specific GPTs for us is because that's the only way that you can share that information, and the way that ChatGPT works between team members.
Okay.
So, like when you go onto ChatGPT and you get that list on the left-hand side of all your searches, they are just for you. They're not usable with anybody else. But when you have a custom GPT, it means that I can see, Jenny went on yesterday and asked this question about that customer. I can see what she's doing.
Shared, I like that. Okay. That's really good. I like that. So we're only on number 2. I told you this was going to be deep.
Right? I think.
But this symphony is played.
Yes. Okay, so moving on to number 3. Very similar. We were thinking about, I was spending an awful lot of time coaching my team, being the only finance director and being the most qualified person in my business, I was spending a lot of time trying to coach and develop my team's knowledge when it comes to more strategic elements and a lot of the stuff that we talk about on the podcast.
Yeah.
So again, we built a custom GPT. We have a book. So we fed the transcribe of the book into it, and we feed the transcribe of every single podcast into the custom GPT as well. So again, we just make sure that the documents are saved down on our SharePoint.
So this is like just a big knowledge bank.
Yes. Of think like Claire. So what would a finance director do? So we've tried to build me.
What would Jesus do?
So like, what would Claire do? So
is that what you're going to call it? I like that. What would Claire do?
What would Claire do?
Let's call it
so
that.
It's essentially becoming like a virtual profit cash growth finance director. So
it's a virtual Claire.
Yeah. So one of my more junior team members can say, for example, this is the customer, it can go to their custom GPT and find a summary of like, I don't know, an electrical contractor that we work for. It can say, give me some key points about this electrical contractor. They can then go to the Claire FD and say, this is a summary of the customer. What KPIs would be really important to drive this business forward? Or what strategies could this customer deploy to help its cash flow? So you can absolutely do that in the general ChatGPT world. But the problem with that is that anybody can do that. And what we're trying to do is, people come and work with us at Profit Cash Growth normally because they've listened to the podcast or they follow me on LinkedIn. And so it's making sure that we've got a brand identity that anybody else can't just pick up on the World Wide Web, for example.
Okay. I'm just writing down something for Profit Cash Growth Extra because it's genius.
I did wonder what you were
I didn't want to say
it
now, but I've just, yeah.
So we basically tried to clone me. So my book, my podcast, my YouTube channel, everything like that.
The world does not need a second one of you, though.
But what that is, again, it's about building a business where my team are not dependent on me all the time.
I get it. It's great.
So that's
great
the
use
first.
case. I love
it's
it.
the first.
It's again
port of
all
call
about
if they've got a question.
This is tremendous because this adds true value to your business. Because this is about businesses that aren't relying on you, that become highly sellable, that become highly investable. All these things are just going to be when an investor looks to buy a business, your business, whatever business that is in the future, then look at all these procedures and just be like, my goodness, I like this because we can slot in any MD and we can run this business.
Yeah,
and I think that's really important.
That one in particular is going to be really valuable for businesses like advisory businesses like mine. So anywhere where you're a highly skilled technical person that is also the head of your business. So, maybe a lawyer, maybe a business coach, that type of thing, where you are also the brand and the face of your business. It then just means that you can capture your identity and make sure that you're able to use AI, but keep it on brand.
Yeah. Great. Now, number 4, can I just do a bit of this one? Because I've been using it for this use case a lot.
Go for it.
And then you can add in where you have as well. But this is about document change control. Now, what I mean by this is that quite often when you're going backwards and forwards, especially with legal transactions, so you've got legal contracts or legal agreements, and you go backwards and forwards negotiating it and having various changes, when they send you the changes back through, especially if they're not using track changes and things like that, often you want to make sure that you're effectively not being fleeced or they've not changed a different clause again. And you tend to lose control of the final version. So what can be very good is to constantly just upload the new version they've sent with the previous version and say, tell me how these differ. It's almost a bit like a spot the difference.
Yeah.
And it can rifle through hundreds of pages of a legal contract and tell you exactly what's changed really, really quickly. So you can go, I'm happy with that. I'm not happy with that. That has become a really good use case for me because I've recently been doing some kind of service level agreement type stuff, legal contracts, all these different cases. And you've had similar, haven't you?
Oh, I had one literally last week with heads of terms.
That's a good one.
We had got to literally what we thought was the final signing, and it was a case of just getting a date in the document changed, and we asked them to change the date. It came back and they'd changed the date, but they'd also removed a clause about asking for a guarantee on the deferred payments, and they'd removed that as well. And I think that without ChatGPT, I think everybody probably would have just had a little glance down the document and said, yeah, the date's changed, that's fine. That was the only difference that we asked for, and that would have been missed. And I just think something like that, it might not have been a problem. It might have been totally innocent, but I think it shows intent, doesn't it? That if they've removed it from the heads of terms, it's probably not going to end up in the SPA. So
exactly. So I think document change, I mean, we could go into
lease agreements, anything, any document
anything.
where you just want to summarise the changes and make sure where this was really valuable with the heads of terms. Again, I set up a project for it in ChatGPT. If you're not using it, just look down the left-hand side and look at the projects, because it just helps organise things and means that you can keep going back to the same thing. So you don't want to, every time I'm speaking to ChatGPT about heads of terms for this specific deal that we're doing, I'm not going and starting a new chat every time. I'm going back to the same chat, and it means that when I very first started that chat, I said, this is what's happening. This is the business that's being sold. This is the relationship, my relationship and my involvement in it. Yeah. These are the things that absolutely must be in the heads of terms. So every time I'm feeding a new document in, it's just summarising, tick or cross next to the bits that aren't included. And it's really important that you don't go and start a new chat every time.
Actually, it doesn't matter. I was just about to say the opposite, because I've always just started new chats when I was going for all the legal stuff. It just remembers. It remembers everything.
It's got limited memory, so it's not guaranteed.
Okay, but if
you go
if it's
back
within
to
a week
the same
of each
chat,
other, like if 6 months has gone by, it might be a problem. But I've found it remembers everything you put in it.
Yeah, there's actually no formal guidance as to how far back the memory goes, and I think that's because it completely depends on the usage and the peaks on the platform and things like that. So yeah, if you're going back a couple of days, it likely will remember. But I've put stuff into ChatGPT in the morning, and I can't find it. I go and start a new chat in the afternoon, and I say, refer to this conversation we had, and it just can't find the information.
Interesting.
So always go back to the same chat. Use projects on the left hand side to pin things and keep things organised that you want to keep going back to.
Projects, what's that?
So project
folders,
so
where you name the chat.
Yeah.
So all the chats are always listed with whatever the first line of the chat was, and you can rename it, can't you?
Yeah.
So are you just talking about you're renaming that chat so you can re-find it?
No, because
it's a project.
Okay, so when you set up a project, you can then put your chats underneath it. So I have a project for profit cash growth. I have a project for personal. So it is like a folder. Yeah. But when I go to like the profit cash growth project, it almost creates like a mini dashboard for me. So instead of just then on the right hand side of the screen having like the question box that you type in, previous questions are underneath there. It says carry on from this question. Like it kind of creates like a mini dashboard for it.
Yeah, yeah.
If you're not using projects, go and check it out.
Do you find that when you're using a chat, if you use it for too long and it becomes too long, it becomes slow? I asked ChatGPT this recently because I felt like the longer you keep a chat going, the like more clunky and slow it gets.
I haven't noticed that.
And I wasn't sure whether there was a connection. They said that there is something to do with memory and things like that. It can be like they'd recommend you start a new chat.
See, but that's what I'm saying. If it's something like heads of terms that you're going to be working on over a 6-8 week period, always go back to the same chat.
Crazy, eh?
Because it does remember.
So number 4 is document change control.
Number 5, this is my favourite. So this requires the ChatGPT agent. And I believe you can only get the agent if you've got the Teams or the Pro license. Mm-hmm. We have. And what I have told the agent to do is every morning to look at the meetings that are booked into my diary. So I've linked my Outlook calendar to it, which is very easy to do. I've linked my Outlook calendar and I've linked my Outlook emails. And then again, there's the SharePoint repository for each of the customers that it's also linked to. And what ChatGPT does is it summarises my day for me. So it looks at the meeting that's in my diary. Normally, there'll be an email trail with somebody saying, oh, we're going to hop on a meeting at this time, this day to talk that through. Yep. So what ChatGPT then does is it finds the relevant email history, summarises the purpose of the meeting, tells me what I need to take to the meeting, and it also will set an agenda and tell me things that are important in that meeting. Don't forget to mention, or don't forget to ask for, don't forget to do this. It tells me that sort of thing. So it gives me like a full briefing for the meetings for the day based on all my email history and conversations I've had with that customer. So I don't have to do that. I can just read that summary. So it's like having a PA.
Yeah, that's just doing just doing your daily prep.
Exactly. So the idea when I first set this up was that the agent would do it every morning at 8 a.m. and then send me an email with a summary for my day. The automation bit is a bit clunky, and sometimes I get an email, sometimes I don't. Sometimes the agent turns off and tells me I need to prompt it again.
Is it like for me, I've not managed to get it to send me an email. It just will not do it. Even though my email's connected, it just will not send an email. It's not yet working.
Well, because
Have you had an email from ChatGPT?
Once.
Okay. How many times?
But instead, what I do get is an email from ChatGPT, not from my GPT, but from the business ChatGPT, telling me that my agent started. Here's a reminder that your agent is scheduled to start at 9 a.m, for example. And that's no help. So it's not foolproof. Don't rely on it to be completely automated. But what I do now do is every morning when I start work is I go in, set the agent and say, give me a summary of my day. And it knows what to do. So that's where it can be really valuable.
Okay. I mean, we could just
go forever.
You could just go forever with this, and there's so much content on this stuff. I mean, there's no point. We've decided to do an episode on AI. Everyone's making every other episode about AI, and you can just go on forever about it. But it's not the be all and end all. But it is game changing in lots of areas. I think the key is it's just its use case is everything, and it's really hard to need to go around summarising everything. Basically, if you choose to, you could use AI for everything. I think what you need to do is go through using it for things to go, is this adding value? Is this not adding value? And then how does it integrate and work in your business and in your workflow? Because it's an endless list. These are just your top 5 where you're getting the most value, I would say, aren't they? At the moment.
Can I give a little bonus one, a number 6?
If you must.
So one of the things we both did on all of our businesses, and it probably took ChatGPT about 8 hours to do this, so we had to set it overnight. But I think this is the beauty of it, that you literally sit in something to work overnight and you're not paying a single person to do it. I wanted a summary of my LinkedIn over the last 6 months. I wanted a list of every single person that had commented or engaged with one of my posts, and I wanted them grouped into accountants, business owners, or something else. I can't remember the other category I did it. And essentially, you set up agent mode, you tell it what you want, and agent mode works. And what agent mode is essentially you watch the screen within ChatGPT. So it logs onto LinkedIn within ChatGPT. It's like a little window, and you can see it literally scrolling through every post that you've done. It will click on it, see the likes, and you watch its mind work, and it says, I'm going to click here. I can see that this person has commented on this day, so I'll make a note of that. I will then close this because there's no other likes. I'll continue to scroll down the feed. I'll click on the next post. So you can literally see it going, and it's just fascinating. And it gave me a whole summary of all the people that had engaged with me on LinkedIn over the last 6 months.
Well, you've destroyed my symphony. Because this is going to make it really shit when we do Profit Cash Growth Extra.
Sorry.
But let's move on to this week's
excited, didn't I?
Profit Cash Growth Extra. So this week's Profit Cash Growth Extra is ChatGPT Agent Mode, which does what, Claire? Oh, it does exactly what you just said it does.
It does
and you've
a job
explained
for
it in
you,
quite some
like you're
detail.
doing it.
We could have just held point 6 as being Profit Cash Growth Extra. Next time, read the script, and then we'll know where we're going with it, yeah?
Sorry.
Anyway, so yeah, it's obviously ChatGPT. People have been talking about ChatGPT's Agent Mode, which has just recently come out. Give it a go. It's the best way to describe it is it's the worst it's ever going to be, and it's only ever going to get better. But my goodness, is it not?
You make it sound really bad.
It's a bit clunky, and it's a bit challenging to get it going, and it doesn't, it needs you to say yes to everything, and it's hard to automate at the moment. There's loads of things wrong with it, but actually there's loads of things right with it. Basically, the difference is with ChatGPT, before with ChatGPT is it can do lots of things, but it can't access any of your own systems and processes. With ChatGPT's agents, you can now give it your logins to your email, to your calendar, to your
you can't give
Facebook,
it your
to your
logins.
LinkedIn. Well, no, it doesn't. But you
log in once via this digital
basically
desktop.
Remember, once you've logged in once, you've given it your logins, and it can log into all your stuff. So, a really good use case. I wrote it on the back earlier when you were talking about your operating manual, yeah, and you're feeding it with all the podcasts. Mainly because this is a job we need to do because we've not finished the job yet. And this is exactly, let me give you a use case of what Agent can do, because this is a massive job. And I sat here thinking, I need to do this because you've tasked me to do this, which is you want me to go back to all of our podcasts, copy the transcribe out, put it down and save it into SharePoint, and then put it into, and then train the agent, don't you? That's what you want me to do. Yeah,
but no, because we've already done that bit of it. But what we don't have is a log.
Who's done what bit of it?
We don't have a log that's easily searchable. So, for example,
who's done all the transcribes? We haven't got transcribes for all the podcast. So what the agent?
Yes, we have.
Where?
In the SharePoint repository.
Oh. Well, what the agent could have, if we didn't have that, what the agent would have, what the use case would have been is the agent could basically, you could say to the agent, what I want you to do is I want you to go to our YouTube channel. I want you to go to the transcribe in each of the YouTube channels. I want you to copy the transcribe into a Word document and save it in this document in our SharePoint. And you could set it off doing that. It could do that on all the 84 podcasts, couldn't it? Well, that's how good it is.
Yes, it could, but we've already done that. But what we haven't done is we now need to go through. So every podcast gets a title, but sometimes it's difficult to understand what that podcast is about from just the title of the podcast. So what we need to do is categorize it. So when I'm speaking to somebody, if if one of my customers mentions to me, oh, I've got this problem, I can just say, oh, you need to go and listen to episode number 48. But it's like, how do I easily search the podcast list and recommend a podcast to somebody? So that's what we need to do is like tag the podcast with certain hashtags or categories or something like that. That's something that the agent could do for us.
Go and set them off doing it.
Go and do that.
Yeah, I got it to do some recent analysis of like, the last 40 LinkedIn posts that I've done to say, can you see any trends in which one's performing better than others?
Yeah.
What is there any reason why there'd be? What kind of things are we covering? What kind of topics? What would you recommend? And just set off doing it for hours. It's basically, you just set them what you would set a human to do. And a human would take a week and they do it over 4 hours and come back to you and it's cost you nothing.
I'll give you one tip though, because I made this mistake. You only get, we're on the Teams license, you only get so many credits for using the agent. And every time you type something in the chat box, so you put agent mode on, every time you type something in the chat box, it uses another credit. And I hadn't realised that. So I was then carrying on. So after the agent had finished doing what it needed to do in agent mode, I then started using the chat like it was just normal ChatGPT and used all my credits.
Goodness, you blew through
So I blew through like a month's worth of credits just having a conversation about the weather, which was just completely unnecessary. And then I had to buy more credits. So don't make that same mistake. Turn agent mode off as soon as you don't use it anymore.
Director blows through all her credits.
It was like £50 to upgrade. So
do as she says, not as she does.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, hope you've enjoyed that. I thoroughly enjoyed that. That was, lots and lots and lots of stuff on AI. And we're probably not going to cover AI in great detail again anytime soon because everyone's doing it and we just don't want to become what everyone else is becoming. But as always, if you feel like you might have outgrown your current accountant, you'd like to work with Claire and the team at Profit Cash Growth. Remember, they're the accountants for 7- and 8-figure businesses. You can nip over to the website, profitcashgrowth.com. You can book a discovery call. Just reach out to Claire on LinkedIn if you want to ask some questions. And as always, please just rate, review and subscribe. We would like some more reviews on the podcast. So if you do get a chance, if you're on Apple or Spotify or wherever you are, to just write a very short review just how you get value from this each week so other people can find us easier. And as always, we'll see you again next week.